Okay, dear participants, a very good afternoon to all. I welcome all of you for afternoon session, that is session number 9, which will be delivered by our eminent resource person, Dr. Rijesh M. And once again, I need not to be introduced him because in session 8 already we introduced him uh, okay, in the previous session. So, once again, I welcome you, sir, Rajesh, sir, on behalf of the department. We can start the session, sir. It's over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the kind words. Is it okay now, sir?
Yeah, okay, sir. The
Fine.
screen is shared. Okay.
Okay. Can you see the screen now?
Ah, sir, we can see, sir, it is visible.
Okay. Okay. Can I move on?
Yeah, you can start, sir. It's over to
Okay.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
A very good afternoon to all of you. Um, um, Today's afternoon session is all about magnesium and its alloys as biodegradable biomaterials. Something that is very different from what we have seen in the previous sections, where we were all trying to make magnesium harder to improve the specific strength. Because the applications there was always aerospace, aircraft, automobiles, etc., where specific strength is very, very important. The talk mostly concentrated on improving the strength of or improving the specific strength of the material for engineering applications. Whenever we talk about biomaterials, things are not as simple as it looks, or we generally do not want material properties to be improved in the dimensions that we generally go for engineering components. I'll tell you why, what is the reason for this. And there are certain materials now which are suitable for certain biomedical applications. And, and magnesium has got certain applications which I'll be emphasizing on, and not all the applications. Yeah, you know me from the past talk, so I'll not introduce you again. Yes. Uh, if you look at magnesium, one strange coincidence that magnesium has is it has got a Young's modulus, which is very similar to cortical bond. Yeah, where you can see that the Young's modulus is uh, uh, Young's modulus of magnesium is 40 to 45 GPa, whereas a cortical bond has got a Young's modulus of 10 to 27 GPa. Now, very similar is what I meant. Because if you look at other materials which we are using as implant in our body, especially screws and when we have fractures inside the bone, it was all stainless steel once upon a time. Got it. And we generally go for 316 stainless steel, which is called as austenitic stainless steel, which is non-magnetic and does not do not corrode much uh, under most of the uh, uh, this scenarios, or in many of the solvents, is what we understood. But if you look at the Young's modulus, it is 193 GPa, which is far more than what cortical bones is supposed to have. Not only the Young's modulus, the density also is very huge. So if you have a stainless steel implant inside your body, it becomes very tough for you to run. You can walk, but it's very tough for you to run because you will have to carry more weight. You'll have to carry more weight than your conventional bone. Your bone is basically a beautiful composite which God has given you, where you have organic substances embedded inside inorganic matrix. Titanium was found better than stainless steel because the density is lower than stainless steel. But if you look at the strength of titanium, it is again 110, which is sometimes 5 times more than what you have cortical bone. What I mean to say is, all these biomaterials have a strength which is much more than what your natural bone is having. Got it. You may ask me what is the problem. It is always the strength which is more than what the natural bone is having is actually good. But it's not the case. We'll see why it is so. Magnesium is again been coincidentally very good biomaterial for implants, is because magnesium is a naturally present inside the bone composition. But you already have magnesium inside your bone composition, and magnesium is one of the required metal for the metabolism of your body. This is the problem. What happens when the strength of your implant is more than the strength of your bone. The strength of your implant is much more than the strength of the bone. The nearby bonds in the vicinity of the implant will not take the load, since this implant takes all the load, and ultimately lead to reduction in density in that region, and that process is called stress shielding. But so stress shielding is something which is very common when you have this implant. If you look at the stress shielding that happens, magnesium may have a stress shielding which is much less than titanium and stainless steel, because the difference in the strength of titanium and cortical bond, and magnesium and cortical bond, magnesium is much closer to that. Now, what do you mean by biodegradable metal implants, or how are they different from normal metal implants? This biodegradable metal implants should have improved corrosion resistance in body fluid. Suppose your body is having certain pH, body fluid is having certain pH, and your metal starts corroding there. We do not want them to corrode and release metal. Got it. The moment a biomaterial releases ions to the body realizes that, sends a message back to your brain and asks it to reject, because body does not take anything that is foreign. So if you want an implant inside your body, you should make sure that the implant does not react with the body fluid. Many times it's not possible. Sometimes we give a coating with hydroxyapatite or other material which the bond is made up of, and we simply mimic a scenario where your brain thinks that it's basically it's a bone component, and then start healing. Got it. So, but biodegradable metal implant has improved corrosion resistance in body fluid during healing process of host tissues. I mean to say that they do not create problem in spite of your implant releasing ions is what I want to say. Support the host tissues with a slow corrosion rate in the body fluid, and then dissolve completely after healing to the host tissue with no implant debris. Got it. See, what I mean to say here is magnesium implant slowly releases
Excuse me, sir.
yeah.
Sir, PPT is not changing, sir.
It's on biodegradable metal implant, no?
Yes.
The heading is biodegradable metal implant, right?
Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm there only. Yeah.
No, sir, your slides are not moving. It is you are in the first slide itself.
Okay.
Magnesium and its alloys as a biodegradable biomaterials.
Oh, is it? Okay, I'm sorry. Here. Okay, let me see. I'll share it again.
Sir, please share it in slide mode.
One second, let me try. How about now?
Okay, sir, but it is not in slide form, sir. In
Okay.
full speed.
Can you help me how to do that?
Sir, open again in slide mode.
One second. How about now?
Sir, select one slide, sir. First slide.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, now it's okay,
Just
sir.
click. It's okay, you continue, sir. No problem.
Continue, sir.
We're getting now?
Yeah, it's okay, sir. Now you can continue.
Okay. Yeah.
It's changing now.
Okay. Yeah. So this is what we were discussing about. Magnesium and its alloys coincidentally have a good property, which is very similar to a cortical bond. Got it. A cortical bond has got a strength of 10 to 27 gigapascal, where a magnesium has 40 to 45 gigapascals. It's not the case with titanium and stainless steel. Titanium and stainless steel are the other bio implants that we generally use. But the Young's modulus goes to 110 and 193. So the mechanical properties are far superior than your cortical bone. And if the mechanical properties are too good, what happens? See, it's not a problem in engineering components, but in biological systems, this higher mechanical properties generally create a small amount of problems. We'll deal with this. Magnesium is naturally present in bone composition, so a magnesium implant will not make much difference. And magnesium is one that is required for metabolism. See, if the strength of your implant is more than the strength of your bone, this is what happens. The nearby vicinity, when you have another bone, that the density of that bone becomes weaker, and such process called as stress shielding. Got it. So stress shielding will be very high as the strength of your implant goes much higher than your cortical bone. So if you have an implant which is as good as a cortical bone, and which does not exist, because bone is a natural composites where you have inorganic substances and organic materials embedded inside that. Bone is a natural composite. Got it. So that's the reason why bones can take huge amount of stress. Bones is the one which take all your weight, in spite of it to be very lightweight. If you look into that. So that's what, the strength is only 10 to 27 gigapascal, and it takes all your weight. But the implant, what you're giving is 40 to 45, and when you compare with other implants that we give, 40 to 45 is far better than 193 and 110. Now, biodegradable metal implants are different from common metal implants, because a good implant is never supposed to release ions. What I want to say is an implant is never supposed to corrode in the body fluid. The moment you have an ion coming out from metal, got it, you have an erosion, got it, you have a corrosion happening in the body fluid, these ions becomes a foreign body, and your brain realizes that there's a foreign body and it rejects. That's why what happens in many times where you have to do a resurgery for metallic implants, because they're not compatible with your body at all. They're considered as foreign bodies. So you need to have some materials which does not release ions at all. They are not corrosive at all. Got it. But it is just not possible to have a material which is not corrosive. You can only do one thing. You can reduce the rate at which corrosion takes place. Titanium is a wonderful metal where your corrosion rate is too small. Actually, the amount of material that corrodes in titanium is so small that we generally have to go for a TEFL extrapolation plot to find out how much material is getting corroded. But the beauty of magnesium is, even if magnesium releases a small amount of ions to the body fluid thinks that this is something which I really want, because I've told you that magnesium is naturally present in a bone composition. Got it. And it is required for metabolism. So when you release this magnesium, your body feels like this is the magnesium that has been given for my metabolic activities, and it takes up that. Got it. So that is what they say. Then they dissolve completely after healing of the host tissue with no implant debris. This implant debris is nothing but the magnesium ions. You will not see any magnesium ions because the body takes up for its metabolism. But that is what we call as biodegradable metal implants. Biodegradable metal implants does not mean that an implant altogether becomes disappeared at one point of time. No, not so. Got it. The ions that has been released from magnesiums are being used for the body. I mean to say that the corrosion that has been taking place, strictly speaking, it should not happen. So even if it happens, the body will take up thinking that it is the magnesium that I'm getting for metabolism. Got it. So in that case, magnesium works as a wonderful biodegradable metal implant. So the most significant challenge with such biodegradable implant is to maintain their mechanical integrity during healing time of the host tissues. Now, when it is getting corroded in this fashion, the mechanical strength of this implant, will it be the same, or will there be a decrease in mechanical integrity? That is a big question, and that's the challenge in this biodegradable metal implants too. Magnesium and iron are most commonly used. See, we all see that. See, you can see them. You see magnesium, iron, and calcium deficiency in people a lot. We see a lot of people with iron deficiency. The same thing is what we see in magnesium and calcium also. Got it. So what we generally assume in this case is, if you have an implant which is actually helping you for a broken bone, along with that, if they are providing enough ions for metabolic activities also, it would have been very good. Only thing, you have to engineer the correct need of ions required. It should not be more. If it's more, it becomes toxic. If it's less, again, it's a problem. So magnesium and iron, if they're working out fine, they're very good. But unfortunately, magnesium and iron are not something that's like how we look into. They're not good biodegradable implants at all, because of two problems. Magnesium has magnesium has a very high corrosion rate. The amount of magnesium the amount of magnesium ions that gets liberated is very much. We don't need so much of magnesium. The problem with iron is all different. Iron does not corrode at all. Got it. The stainless steel that you use, they do not corrode and give iron at all. So both of them are problems. You do not get. So magnesium is corroding at a higher corrosion rate, where iron is not corroding at all. So both of them does not come under my category of biodegradable implant at all. So that's where you need to do some engineering. What you need to do is, I'm not covering iron in my topic, I'm covering only magnesium. So I just wanted this magnesium not to corrode this much. A degradation rate of pure magnesium should be improved, and generally done by alloying and surface engineering to use a biodegradable metal implants. Correct. You can either do one thing, you can alloy magnesium with some alloying additions and reduce the corrosion rate, or you can coat magnesium with some materials, where the magnesium degradation is reduced. So this is where the challenge lies. This is where the engineering of these two things lies. If you look at the magnesium products which have come in the market, it is very recent. 2010, the first material in magnesium. It's a very recent technology. I mean, what I want to tell you is, I am not an expert in this field. I mean, in the process of learning how things are working out, the first magnesium implant has come in 2010, called as Magnezix. It's the first approved and CE certified biodegradable screw that has been used, manufactured by Powder Metallurgy. And the second one, called as Magmaris, is a biodegradable stents we use by cardiologists to actually open up blocks. And both of them were approved in clinical trials too. See, this is what it is. Got it. You can see the screws that is made up of magnesium, and this is a stent. you have a block in the heart, they insert the stent, and they actually see the stents, no, actually are small in size, and they are inflated. Stents are generally inflated, and stents are made up of were made up of polymers before. When you use polymers for stents, the structural strength is not that good. Whereas when you go for magnesium, the strength of the stent is very good. They become very stiff. But when it's very becomes, and the stent remains for a longer time. Got it. The stent does not, you don't take the stent out. You have a block in the artery, you insert the stent, inflate the stent and make it bigger, and make that stent for there for a longer time. Thus, you are increasing the diameter of the wall, where your heart functions much better. So with the stent will remain there for a longer time, giving a good opening for the wall with a very good diameter. So I don't want my stent to collapse at any point of time, and I want my stent to be rigid and be there. And being a metal with low weight and high strength, this an ideal material for a stent. But at the same time, this magnesium screws, since they liberate or release Mg plus ions, they are actually good in this aspect also. Got it. Now we will see how we manufacture them. Got it. The typical method of manufacturing magnesium is casting and a rod product. Now we have seen that when you go for a casting and rod product, you have a lot of second phase particles. And the second phase particles do very bad when it comes to corrosion because of this because of this two phase galvanic corrosions and other issues. So so even though magnesium and its alloys are normally processed by extrusion, casting, etc., the amount of products that has been used in dentistry from rot and used in biomedical applications is considerably less. We generally go for a method called as powder metallurgy method. Got it. In powder metallurgical methods, we can either make a powder out of magnesium or a magnesium alloy. Got it. There are many ways in which you can make a magnesium powder. One of the way is called as ball milling. We use a hard ball. We use a hard ball, a lot of magnesium scraping inside, and you start rotating. It's just something like a washing machine, you know, it just rotates. Got it. Now what happens is ball will come and hit another ball, and if you have a magnesium in between this, they'll get fragmented. Got it. So in this particular case, the size is coming down. Got it. And ultimately, you will get a size that you actually want. Since we are actually talking about a nano-structured magnesium, you can go for this. You can go for this particular ball milling to a nano-structured particles also. The one that has been used in many of the laboratories to do this is called as a planetary ball mill. We use a planetary ball mill to reduce the size to nanocrystalline size. Sometimes if you do not have an alloy and if you want to make an alloy, what we do is we mix two different powders and then we go on doing this ball milling for a longer time. Got it. The individual powders will become smaller and smaller. Not only that, one powder will actually collide with another powder. There's a temperature rise and you expect diffusion to take place. And such alloys that has been formed not by melting, pouring and saltification, but by diffusion of two solid powders, we call it as mechanical alloy. Got it. So if you're going for two or more powders, yes, it is basically a mechanical alloy. So what happens out here is when these two particles that comes together gets welded with each other. Got it. Now, if it's going and hitting another ball, yes, it's fracturing again. Welding again, welding, fracturing, rewelding, again welding, fracturing, rewelding, and it goes like that. Now, how do you know that mechanical alloying has taken place? Is you sample some of the powders from from this drum, and you go for an XRD analysis. You get peaks corresponding to the planes that exist in that particular alloy. So if you are getting a plane which is corresponding to an alloy, and you're getting a peak or intensity peak for a plane corresponding to a certain alloy, yes, that alloy has been formed. Got it. If it's not, it has not been formed. Got it. You will get individual peaks for individual elements. So you get a fine microstructure at any cost, because the material that you're going is the size reduction process from a higher size to a lower size. Sometimes a nano size, grain size, and alloying of powder particles. These are the applications that we generally go for in powder metallurgy. What are the factors that influence the characteristics of the end product powders? Got it. To what size? What determines whether you can get a nano powder or what? Got it. It always depends upon the material that you have chosen. Suppose if you are taking magnesium, got it. How do you get a magnesium nano powder? Yes, you need to go for a various permutation combination ultimately optimized. Got it. One is you have to go for a ball to powder ratio. Got it. You need to go for a ball to powder ratio, depending upon the size that you want. For 1 kg of powder, how many balls is what you need. Got it. So you can actually vary this and find out the size reductions accordingly. Milling time. Obviously, as the milling time increases, you expect the particle size to come down. Same as with turning speed. If your turning speed is more, you don't need to have a very high milling time. Got it. You can get a particle of very fine size. Sometimes the problem, there are some metals, where you cannot do this that easily. Magnesium is one such metal. Got it. Because at higher temperature, they become explosive in nature. Got it. So if you are going for size reduction of magnesium powders, make sure that you are going to use a preventive atmosphere and temperature not that high where it goes for explosion. Got it. One way to do is you do not take a pure magnesium, you go for a magnesium alloy. Yes, they are not that explosive. And second time is control the temperature. Controlling the temperature is possible only when you're grinding it in wet conditions. Got it. You are using some chemical in the liquid form where it is not reactive with the powders. That the liquid is just to extract heat and make it a wet grinding process where you do not have a very high atmosphere, so that it becomes an explosive or weld nicely. So that is one way of producing powder. In powder metallurgy, the first step is production of powder, and in many applications we have seen powders getting produced by mechanical ball milling, and magnesium powders by mechanical ball milling, and not by conventional atomization, because melting magnesium is a very risky job. Because magnesium tends to explode at higher temperatures. So we generally do not go for this melting and atomization. Atomization is a process but there are some applications where we go for atomizations too. What happens, you heat it at a very high temperature, melt the metal, and allow this metal to pass through a small orifice and rapidly quench it in some media. When you rapidly quench in some media, they will take the size and shape of how atomized, and they become the powder. Okay. Now, why do powder metallurgical products gain a lot of importance in biomaterials? Is because we want this biomaterials, especially magnesium, in the form of forms. You know what's a form? Form will have a larger volume where you have a lot of porosities inside. Got it. So powder metallurgical processes is very different from conventional process, because you can design porosities out here in powder metallurgical component. See, if you look at the mechanical properties of all those manufacturing routes, we say that rod product has got the highest density. Cast structures are inferior to rod structures. The mechanical properties are not as good as a rod structure. And if you look at powder metallurgical component, it fall in between both cast and rod. They say that if you compress the powder metallurgical component to a larger extent, you can get very close to density of a rod product. Here we are exploiting the other way. If you are not compressing it nicely, you can actually design porosities. If you are the powders that you have formed, if you're not compressing it with huge load, you compress with certain loads with an intention of deliberately having interconnecting pores and making a component. That's what I want for this applications. Why do we need foam, or why do we need this porosities? Because I wanted to enhance biological interaction with the environment of the host tissue or the bond. I want a biological interaction of fluids, and that is possible when you have porosities. So when you have this porosities, there is another problem. Got it. These porosities are the places where this corrosive atmospheres goes and sit. For example, galvanic corrosion, pitting corrosions and all. A pitting corrosion happens only in the presence of a pit. Got it. So these locations can act as some crevices where you can actually store this corrosive media, which can actually make it again more corrosive. Got it. So I have to think over this and optimize. I want my material to be porous so that there should be a biological interaction. At the same time, I don't want it to be too porous that it will aggravate corrosion. Got it. So that is where the engineering challenge in making this is, intensively focus on production of controlled or designed porous biodegradable implant. Controlled in such a way that fluid interactions, biological interactions are good, but I'll not have stagnant fluids where corrosions can be initiated. There are many ways in which people do this, by coating and other things. I'm not going deep into these things, but if you alloy mechanically with these nano-sized diamond powders, you alloy this with mechanically nano-sized diamond powders, undeformed diamond particles. Diamond is so hard they don't get deformed, possibly cause more pore formation in the microstructure. So they will have a lot of pores. Now, once you are done with this controlled porosity is obtained by controlled compression. First step in powder metallurgical production route is production of powders. Second step is compaction. How much you have to compact depends upon how much you need porosities. How much you have to compact depends upon what is the initial particle size. Or how much you have to compact depends upon how much interconnecting pores that you need. So you engineer it, optimize it, compress it as much as you want, and now you get the product which is not strong. It becomes strong only if you sinter it. Sintering is heating to a temperature above 0.6, 0.7 melting point, so that you will have a diffusion taking place between one particle to another particle. Got it. Sintering is the technology used for binding one particle to another particle. Got it. Two particles, when they are very close to each other, they are bound with the binder. Got it. Slowly, at the higher temperatures, these binders will get broken, and two particles will have a diffusion happening between these particles. Sometimes it's called pipe diffusion and other aspects. So particles diffuse and they become one. Now the diffused particle will tend to grow, taking up all those porosities. Now sintering temperature and sintering time again is chosen in such a way that how much porosity that you want. Otherwise, what happens? Sintering helps in densification. Densification, these particles grow. These particles grow and consume all those voids and porosities. So if you want them interconnected in the same fashion that we have designed, we should always make sure that the growth aspect is not that high, because we wanted nanostructures. So we go for a very specific sintering process called as spark plasma sintering, which is concentrated only on certain particles and not throughout the specimens. Got it? So that's what is called as spark plasma sintering. Another way in which you make this is called as an injection molding, called as metal injection molding. Got it. This is very common in the case of polymers, but in metals we do it by mixing the binder. We go for this metal powders and polymer binders and high shear mixing, and we go for pelletization. And these pellets are fed into a injection molding machine where these particles are injected to the mold. Then we dip this product inside a solution which is called a solution debinding. Key to high temperatures where you have a thermal debinding. Got it. Still the material is not sintered. Got it. They are in green state, so we take it to a sintering. To a temperature which is less than the melting point of these powders. Okay. So when you sinter, you can see that material gets densified. Control the sintering temperature, control the sintering time, and decide on that. You're getting an additional secondary processing like machining, welding, etc. can be carried out here. So you get a final product out of metal injection molding. So metal injection molding again is basically a powder metallurgical route where you get the component. In this process, the advantage of going for a powder metallurgical route and not casting and rod product is you control the porosities. You are getting a component with porosities. When you have porosities, the advantage is the surface area is improved because you have got interconnecting pores. So when the surface area is increased, you will come to know that the fluid interactions, the biological interactions are much better. We were discussing that you have to pure magnesium is not feasible to be a biodegradable biomaterial because they corrode nicely. Got it. So we have to add something to this magnesium so that they decreases the corrosion rate. If you look into the major alloying additions for magnesium, it is aluminum or rare earth elements. Got it. Severe hepatotoxicity or noticed after the implementation of rare earth metals such as cerium, yttrium, etc. The biologically safe magnesium alloys generally have alloying additions like calcium, because calcium bond needs calcium, zirconium, zinc, and manganese. The other alloying additions are strontium, lithium, cadmium. silver, etc. Got it. These alloys can be binary, ternary, or more. What I mean to say is that you can have more than one alloying additions. When you have only one alloying additions, we call it as binary. And you have two, we call it as ternary, and it can be more than that too. Calcium helps in accelerating the bone growth. Calcium improves the corrosion resistance. That is the prime reason why we are adding this alloying additions. We wanted to improve the corrosion resistance. Alloys of high calcium content, including magnesium 5, 10, and 20 calcium, are found to be very brittle. Got it. Whenever you are adding calcium, corrosion resistance is increasing, but mechanical properties are coming down, is what we observe. So cytocompatibility evaluation results indicate that magnesium 1 calcium alloy induces no toxicity to cells. So if you go for magnesium 1 calcium alloys, yes, it is not as brittle as when you have 20. Zinc is another metal which improves the corrosion resistance. The in vivo degradation rate of aluminum zinc containing magnesium alloy AZ3-1B was slower than the pure magnesium. So the people have done a lot of studies in this and found that when you add zinc, your corrosion resistance improved drastically. Neodymium is one alloying addition that we generally give for magnesium. If you go for alloying additions like 90% magnesium, 4 weight percentage lithium, 4 weight percent aluminum, and 2 weight percent neodymium, we found that that led to considerable non-inflammatory bond remodeling process, in which new growth of bones in the periosteal reactions regions, which is predominated. This is not a good news. For this reason, the study suggests that this alloy appears to be a less suitable degradable implant material for cortical bone applications. So all alloying additions, if it's not increasing the corrosion resistance, it is of no use. Strontium, otherwise, strontium is a well-known grain refiner. If you have studied strontium in engineering applications, got it. What happens is the strontium significantly improves the osteoblastic activity. Osteoblastic activity is nothing but formation of cells which can heal, is what we call it as. So in the presence of strontium actually produces cells that can heal the bone. That's what we call it as osteoblastic activity and bond formation in vivo. Got it. So strontium really helps to heal faster. Now, strontium is an excellent grain refiner. What I mean to say is the strontium will go and sit on the grain boundaries and form second phase particles. Got it. So suppose magnesium, zinc, zirconium, magnesium, zinc, strontium alloys result in rough boundaries distributed by secondary particle called as Mg17Sr2. Mg17Sr2 is an intermetallic precipitate formed out of adding of strontium. They are formed over the second phase. This phase now what happens, when you have when you have some precipitate over the grain boundaries becomes anodic compared to grains. Got it. This magnesium, which was supposed to be there inside the grain, Mg17 is present on the grain boundary. So grain boundary become more anodic than the grain. Got it. So you have a galvanic effect, and the corrosion is aggravated in that case. Got it. So addition of less than 2% of strontium ensures significantly reduced corrosion rate. So whenever you are adding strontium, make sure that you are not adding more than 2%. If you're adding more than 2%, it will actually multiply the corrosion effect. Cerium is another metal that what we add to improve the corrosion resistance. During solidification process of magnesium aluminum cerium alloy, cerium particles aggregate at the solid liquid interface, which reduces the atomic diffusion rate, inhibiting the growth of magnesium matrix grains. Again, this cerium is also a grain refiner, just like strontium. So aluminum cerium faces forms and distribute along grain boundaries, which prevents the sliding of boundaries at the course of deformation. So if the cerium content of the alloy is very high, Al11Ce3 acicular particles reduce the corrosion rate of Mg alloys by forming network on magnesium matrix. So when you have this AlCe3 acicular particles, this will actually reduce the corrosion of magnesium. So cerium has got a positive effect on reducing the corrosion. Microstructures. This is the microstructure of various particles. When you're doing a ball milling process, you can see the particles getting fragmented. This is basically magnesium zinc yttrium alloy chips in the beginning, but it just been formed for 5 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours, and 20 hours. Got it. You can see the particle size distribution in the curve, but we can see the particle size reduces as the time goes on increasing. And ultimately, you are getting a particle which does not have, this is basically a sintered particle. Here you can see that, you do not have porosities at all. If you need porosities, we'll have to engineer porosities in the way that we want. The surface plays a major role. Got it. See, they say that current density is nothing but current per unit area. The area, the area where you expose your material to the corrosive atmosphere is more important. What I mean to say is the surface characteristics of their implant is very, very important. Got it. Now, when I'm talking about area, I talk about suppose if your surface is having a lot of hills and valleys and protrusions, again the surface area is more. If the surface is very flat, the surface area may not be that high. So surface characteristics is a very, very important phenomena to be understood for biomaterials. So surfaces may contain porosities, cavities, or channels at micro scale, which play an important role in cell proliferation and in growth into the implant. Got it. So they say that, if you have some porosities, cavities, or channel in the micro scale, they really help in cell proliferation, in growth into the implant. Individual surface parameters such as roughness, chemical composition, electric charge, wettability, and crystallinity perform an important role in terms of compatibility. Got it. Yeah, this is important because when you have a roughness, when you have your material that has been rough, the contact area is much more. The chemical composition, yes, we have just seen that, instead of pure magnesium, if you are going for a magnesium calcium, yes, the corrosion rate is less. Depending upon the electric charge, the wettability, got it. Wettability plays a very important role because if the body fluid is not wetting then we will not have any interactions. Got it. So if you want to increase the wettability, one way to do is go for a coating which has got good wettability. And if you otherwise, you'll have to change the implant material altogether. Crystallinity is important. They're all important before you go for biocompatibility. Surface properties have a significant effect on stress shielding. Got it. So that is what, if the surface roughness is very high, you may not have the stress shielding to a larger extent. Surface properties have got too much to do with wear resistance and fatigue failures too. So surface roughness is a key factor for osseointegration rate and mechanical fixation of implant to bone. So we deliberately make some rough surface on the surfaces. That's why I told you a powdermetallurgical product with an amount of porosity on the surface is actually very helpful for bio implant. Surface roughness at microscale ranges improves the newborn formation rate due to an increase in protein absorption and cellular activity. Got it. So if your bioimplant is having this small surface roughness and you have a microscale range, due to those pores, you can increase the protein absorption and cellular activity, thus healing the bones. Pore size and pore morphology have a significant effect on cell attachment and proliferation. It was proved that pores with hexagonal morphology increases cell attachment more than pores with spherical shape. Again, that is more important. See, when you are centering your material, when you're compacting your material, when you are actually coating a material, make sure that the surface pore, if it's hexagonal, the pore is having an hexagonal morphology, they have got a significant effect on proliferation. Spherical. So we should be able to engineer your pores in this way. So what happens is the risk of infection is decreased by increasing pore size after implantation. So if the pore size is very high and if healing is very fast, the risk of infection is decreased to a large extent. But the only problem where we need to restrict the increase in pore size is the mechanical properties of the implant comes down if the pore size increases. The mechanical strength of a porous material is not that great, not good. So this has to be optimized. If you look at the mechanical properties, I have not included a powdermetallurgical product out here. If you look at all those extruded and decapped specimens, you can see a good amount of tensile strength and yield stress value to all magnesium alloys. This you don't see. This we do not want. Is the question. Got it. Our major problem in the previous talk was since the material is lightweight, how can we increase the strength to a larger extent? But here that is not the case. Here we do not want the strength to be that high. The strength is very high. The problem is you will have a problem like stress shield. If the strength is very high, you will have this problem. So I don't want this stress. I don't want this high stress. If the stress is very close to the value of the cortical bond, that is more than enough for me. Got it. So I literally do not go for all these materials. I go for a powdermetallurgical product. Okay. Now the most important properties out here, when you cannot close down this talk without discussing biological properties. Magnesium is one of the most important elements constructed within the human body, where it is involved in high number of enzymatic reactions. You need magnesium to grow, for your metabolism to happen. Magnesium takes place in synthesis process of proteins and nucleic acid, stabilization of plasma membrane, and many other cellular activities. You need magnesium. Amount of magnesium in an average adult human body is about 21 to 28 grams, and more than 50% of which is stored in bone tissues. And when you have fracture on these bone tissues, that is where the problem comes. Soft tissues contain 35 to 40% of this content and less than 1% in sequestered in serum. I mean, sequestered means it has been stored nicely. Got it. So what I mean to say is, when you have so many magnesium which has been present inside the bone, when your body needs some magnesium, the bone will secrete this magnesium for the body. So that's the sole purpose. Magnesium element, which is sequestered in a bond, acts as a reservoir for acute change in magnesium levels of serum. But now the serum levels, the magnesium levels of serum is changed. Mg2 plus bivalent ions play an important role in determining bond fragility. Right. So Mg2 plus ions take place in transformation process of a mature bond into a mature bond. So this is how your bonds get strengthened. Presence of Mg in bone composition increases the elasticity of the bond. The bond becomes stronger. Presence of magnesium has got significant effect on osteoblastic cell differentiation. I mean to say that the ability of healing of this bones. So bone formation around and over degraded magnesium implants prove that it affects on accelerating of bone healing. Got it. So if you look at the vicinity towards, see when we did an in vivo experiment and found that the bone formation in the vicinity of magnesium implant is very good. Healing is all very good. That is because magnesium implant liberates Mg2 plus. Got it. Due to this Mg2 plus, which has been absorbed by the bonds in the vicinity, the healing happened to be very good, and that is one of the reasons why we call this as biodegradable implant. Magnesium degradation led to the release of Mg2 plus ions to surrounding tissue, which resulted in stimulation of local cells to bone formation. Got it. So the controlled delivery of Mg2 plus ions is our intention. Not only that, when you have this, see, I have told you that magnesium is a corrosive metal. Got it. The corrosive metal, to a certain extent, Mg2 plus will be absorbed by the bone, and they are used for healing, and all of the things are true. But what about if the quantity is much more, which they cannot take? That is very important. That is where you have to work on. That is where you have to work on. You have to actually make an alloy in such a way that Mg2 plus ions are not released in a huge quantity. You have to release Mg2 plus only in the quantity where you wanted to heal. In that case, magnesium becomes an excellent biodegradable biomaterial. Got it. Not only that, see, when you talk about corrosion, you will have an anodic reaction as well as a cathodic reactions. And many times it will so happen that you will have this hydrogen gases evolution during corrosion taking place. Got it. So hydrogen gas, which is released during degradation process of Mg and its alloys, they say, many of the studies say it can be tolerated by human body. Got it. But if the amount of hydrogen gas release is very high, you will have complications in the healing time. So corrosion of magnesium should be controlled to decrease the risk of gas accumulation. So that is very important. So the majority of the work in biodegradable materials should be concentrating on controlling the corrosion rate of magnesium alloy. Controlling the corrosion rate of magnesium alloy starts with a lot of things, starts with what is the alloying additions that you're adding? What is the manufacturing route that you're going into? Are you going for a porous material? If you're going for a porous material, do you have interconnecting pores? What is the surface roughness of your material? Got it. All these things are important in choosing about this corrosion rate. The amount of gases cleared from the implantation site also depends upon implanted region and available blood flow. That is also important. Which region it's been implanted and the available blood flow in that particular region, again decides the amount of gases cleared. That's what they say. The presence of zinc in composition of Mg alloys increases the osteoblastic cell proliferations. Zinc actually heals very faster. The osteoblastic cell proliferation is nothing but formation of new cells in the bones, which is the reason for healing. Got it. The presence of zinc, such cell formation becomes easier. So, but there is another issue out here. So, see, anything which is cross the limit becomes a problem. That becomes cytotoxic. So zinc in certain concentrations is good for this, but if the zinc is beyond that, you'll have a cytotoxic effect. Hold for a second. Okay. Magnesium implant, which is alloyed with different amount of aluminum, surprisingly did not show any cytotoxic or neurotoxic effects, up to 9-8%. Magnesium aluminum is a very common alloy, generally not recommended in many of the biomaterials. One of the reasons what they say is aluminum has got neurotoxic effect after certain time, but it's been proved that till 9% it is not cytotoxic or neurotoxic. But if the aluminum content is more than 9%, you need to worry about that. So magnesium aluminum works well if the aluminum content is less than 9%. So osteoblastic activities was increased with increasing amount of aluminum up to 9%. So release of aluminum ions can be tolerated by human body at lower levels. But the problem happens when it goes for a higher level. So, so that's all what I want to talk about, and I would like to conclude my talk with these type of conclusions. Magnesium degrades in a physiological environment without dissipating any toxicity. That is what the moral of the story is. Magnesium degrades. Got it. That magnesium degrades into Mg2 plus, but that's not toxic. It's not only toxic, what is Mg2 plus is been absorbed by your body fluid, which has been used for repairing of bones and bone tissues. Therefore, it eliminates the need of a secondary surgical operation for an implant removal, provided that its degradation rate is harmonized with the tissue healing rate. So you are completely avoiding. You're completely avoiding a secondary surgical operations to remove this, remove the implant that you've already kept there, just because the implant is degrading. Among the available synthesis method, we found that powder metallurgy appears to be the most favorable method. The reason for this is you can actually control the interconnected porous structures with desired pore size and distribution. It is essential for an enhanced biological interaction of the materials and implanted environment. Got it. Powder metallurgical products, you can control the porosities. When you can control the porosities, you can have interconnected pores. When you have interconnected pores, you can have a very good biological interaction with of the material and the implanted environment. So that's the second conclusion about the material that we going to use in this. It's not only the microstructure that is important. The role of material surface characteristics is also important. Because I've told you, so the surface of your material is primarily responsible for corrosion to take place. So textured surfaces improve the cell attachment and proliferation. I mean to say that you have, if you do not have a soft surface and you have a rough surface with the hills and valleys, they will help for the cell attachment and proliferation. That this is how a natural bone is. Natural bone is not as smooth as the metal after a powder metallurgical component. So if your natural bone is not that smooth, it will have a lot of hills and valleys and protrusions on the surfaces. So if you are mimicking the natural bone surface with both nano and micro textures, This will promote osteointegration is what we study. Got it. So that is what you need to do. You have to mimic how your natural bone surface is. The natural bone surface is not smooth, and it's been designed and as rough to increase the cell attachment and proliferation. So you need to actually make your biomaterial also in that particular fashion. Low ductility of magnesium is the limitation, since usually the surgeons needs to bend the fixture to fit in the hard tissues. Right. Yeah. See, magnesium is not a ductile material. The reason why magnesium is not a ductile material is covered in the first session today. Got it. Magnesium is not a magnesium is not a soft material because of HCP structure. They do not have slip planes to deform. Their slip planes are very hard. Got it. So they have very limited slip planes, have basis slip planes. So they're not ductile. This low ductility is a problem in magnesium, because usually surgeons will use this implant by bending and fixing inside, and your material cannot do that. At the same time, the stent material should be ductile enough to allow forming of complex structures. Got it. Stent should be hard and ductile. Got it. The stent should be hard so that it will open up. At the same time, it should be ductile enough for a bulb to inflate that. Researchers have identified alloying elements that improve the ductility of magnesium without having a significant extent of mechanical strength. That is what our job is. Got it. So to facilitate a surgeon to give good amount of ductility for magnesium, for him to fix this biomaterial. That is what your job is. So previous investigations proved that the main drawback of pure magnesium and its alloys is corrosion rate and unpredictable behavior in body fluid. In vivo tests are must for further understanding of the behavior in living systems. A systematic and comprehensive approach to achieve well-controlled and durable material properties is needed to compensate unpredictable nature of living systems. So with that, I finish my talk. This is basically a magnesium porous materials microstructure being taken for controlled biological interactions. Thank you for your patient listening.
Now the session is open for discussion. Participants, if you have any questions, you can ask it now.
Should I ask a question?
Yeah.
Myself, Dr. Pankaj Kumar Singh from IIT BHU.
Okay.
Your presentation was nice.
Thank you, sir.
As you have mentioned, sintering.
Okay.
There is another process, calcination.
Correct.
And another you have mentioned some binder for
Okay.
the magnesium alloy. Okay.
Okay.
My question is that which binder can be used in this process, and whether it needs some specific temperature to remove that binder?
Yes, it needs temperature, sir. It needs. Generally, we go for some polymer binders. Polymer binders where it binds with magnesium nicely, and
Okay.
once
Can you name that binder?
I really do not know the chemical name of the binder. I can get back to you if you want.
Okay. It needs some temperature also.
It needs some temperature because it has to be melted out.
Okay. And what should be the timing of that?
There are two ways in which we take it out. One is chemical leaching. Another one is heating to a higher temperature and removing it.
Achha, another question is that of the calcination and the sintering,
Yeah.
there is a gap.
Okay.
So how can we know
Yeah.
of this magnesium? Whether what should we, as we know that its melting point is 650, isn't
Okay. Correct.
magnesium? But alloy, when we are going to form,
Yeah.
how we will decide that what should be the calcination and the sintering temperature?
Yeah. See, sir, when we go for magnesium as well as solute atoms, and we start blending it together, and we take up an XRD peak, and you will get a correct composition of this alloy. The XRD peak will give you the composition of the alloy, how much amount of solute atom is there from their peaks. Go to the phase diagram, find out the melting point of that particular alloy, and 0.6 and 0.7% of the melting point of that particular alloy is the sintering temperature of that alloy, not 0.6% of the pure metal. Because as you go on alloying, the melting point decreases. 600, you will not have a sintering temperature very close to 600 for magnesium, because the alloys generally have a very low melting point.
No, sir. I want to ask the XRD. How we will decide by XRD for the calcination and sintering temperature?
XRD processes will give you the amount of alloys that has been formed.
Oh, that I know, but what about that is the ball milling and other things that I know.
Correct.
The composition we make, that is okay.
Okay.
But what should be the temperature of the sintering and calcination? How it will be decided?
Sir, if you look at the phase diagram, suppose if you're going for a magnesium aluminum sintering, ball milling process, we go on adding magnesium and aluminum, and you sample out, you will come to know that what is the exact percentage of aluminum that has formed out here, depending upon the solid solubility. Depending upon the crystallographic planes, you will understand what is the composition of aluminum which has been formed mechanically alloyed with magnesium. Suppose if it's 5% aluminum, go back to the phase diagram, find out the temperature of aluminum 5%, magnesium 5% aluminum, and corresponding to that particular temperature, you go for 0.6 to 0.7 TM.
Okay. Can we do DTA TGA?
You can do, sir. You can do. Because in DTA TGA, what happens, sometimes it may so happen that you may get a liquid plus solid phase.
Okay.
You may get a liquid plus solid phase. See, in a pure metal, you have a clear distinction of solid to liquid. But for an alloy, you will have solid, liquid plus solid, and then liquid. So you go for this DSC or DTA, what happens is the moment it starts liquidifying, you get a peak out there. Got it. It is possible to have sintering in liquid plus solid state also. We call it as liquid phase sintering.
Okay. But what is the gap? What about the gap? The calcination and sintering gap. How will know the gap?
No, this can be found out only from the phase diagram, sir. Existing phase diagram. You have to know you have to know the chemical form. You have to find out the chemical chemistry of your alloy formed from an XRD peak. Find out the exact solute content. Get back to the phase diagram. Look at the different phases at that particular composition, and then select the sintering temperature.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
So any questions from the participants? Okay. So I believe there won't be more questions from the participants. So I thank Dr. Rajesh.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
So
where's
this magnesium biodegradable you are telling, you know?
Yeah. Correct.
Only you have to take only magnesiums, or strontium also you told? No?
Correct. No, it's not strontium. It's a magnesium strontium alloy.
Yeah. Strontium alloy.
Yeah.
That is mainly reason is that what is the alloy composition will be there?
Correct.
What is the alloy composition you are making?
No.
Alloy means only these two metals, or mixture of any other metals will
You
be?
can go for you can go for a mixture of it can be a binary, it can be a ternary, or it can be four also. The primary intention out here is I want to reduce my corrosion rate to a larger extent.
That is what, sir. But magnesium is corrosion. It will undergo corrosion.
It undergoes
Definitely,
corrosion.
no?
Yeah.
Whether you have to do coating with a polymer or something.
No, that is also possible. That is, see,
Possible,
sir, if
but
you are actually
how-
going,
No,
That-
which metal is protecting from that corrosion?
no, see, sir, that's different, you know. So in like titanium, if you are going for titanium, we go for hydroxyapatite coating. Hydroxyapatite is basically a ceramic coating, which is mimicking our bone itself. Because the reason why we need to do that is because because titanium surfaces, you know, the biological interaction is very bad. In the case of magnesium, I want my magnesium to corrode. It's not that I do not want. I want Mg2 plus to liberate. That's why it is called as I want, but I do not want it to corrode more than certain limit. The alloying additions to magnesium is not to make magnesium not corrode at all. This is to make it corrode in a controllable way.
Okay.
Got it. Yeah, I want my Mg2 plus to go to the solution, because Mg2 plus, if it goes to the solution, your body needs Mg2 plus for metabolism. Your body will take that. Your bones will take that. Your bones will heal that.
That will be in part per billion, no?
No, it can go for 21 to 25 mg is what I'm saying. You know that, no, I'm talking about ions, Mg2 plus ions. It's a small thing only.
Okay.
No, don't expect that the entire screw will get dissolved. No.
Now, how it is application in the biomedical, sir?
No, see what this has been used as a stent. This has been used in a screw in orthopedic implants. When you use
that's
this as
morning.
screw in, yeah.
Dr. Manoj told morning, that is same thing.
Okay.
Same thing. I'm asking, any other application is there in biomedical?
No, there are only
Orthopedic,
two.
except
There are only two things that I know. One is stents in cardiology.
cardiology.
Cardiologists use this to make stents. When your arteries are blocked,
Yeah.
you take this magnesium stents inside that block and then blow it with an air so that it becomes bigger. Now magnesium is a very strong metal. It does not collapse. It'll remain like that for a longer time, which will open your arteries. You survive a heart attack without much of difficulty.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Actually, you are saying about the ring that is kept in the heart during the blockage. I think you are talking about that now.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
You are saying that magnesium is going to corrode or going to degrade.
Yeah.
Okay. And you are supposed to, you are saying that it will do, and that is the natural process.
Correct.
Isn't?
Correct.
Then whatever the alloy that we put in that portion, the ring that we will put in the heart portion,
It will not collapse.
it will release that magnesium also during that process also.
It will release magnesium, sir, because that magnesium is actually good. It will release magnesium in ppms. And
It's
that,
okay, but alloy will become weaker, na? If it go on to release.
That is the challenge, sir. That is the challenge. I want my material to become corrode without reducing the strength.
But how the alloy will become go on to composition will change, na? Alloy composition will go on to change.
No, it will be a uniform corrosion. Composition will not change. The matter will decrease.
Okay.
It will be uniform corrosion. Matter will decrease, but the strength will not decrease.
Okay,
The
one
strength
last
will not
question.
decrease. Yeah.
If you are saying in such a case about the magnesium, then if it is put in the form of the ring in the heart problem, okay, then at what time it go on to completely degrade?
It will not completely degrade, sir. It will not completely degrade for a lifetime, because what happens, magnesium has got excellent strength because of their HCP structure. Magnesium is having an HCP structure. It will be stable there for a longer time. It will not degrade and go. We don't want a block to degrade. No, if the block is getting degraded, the block will be a block again. I want the block. I don't want the stent to be removed. Got it. If the stent has to be removed, you have to cut that into a bypass surgery.
But I know that
Yeah.
whenever the material is kept in that for the part of implant, it go on to degrade in 10 to 15 years or corrode.
Yes, yes.
Then you are
Yeah,
saying that
no,
it will keep at a lifetime. How you are saying that thing?
no, see, sir, in stainless steels, we generally have this problem. Got it. After 15 years, you generally have some amount of, so for example, for some amount of poisoning taking place, like titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium. Many people have undergone vanadium poisoning. So the organ gets rejected out. Whereas in magnesium, you don't have this problem because Mg21 plus is what has been rejected, which body takes. The only thing that I need to control is the rate at which Mg2 plus has been liberated. If the rate at which Mg2 plus has been liberated is very high, then you will have to take it out.
How rate will be controlled?
Controlling the alloying additions, doing an in vitro study. You do
Okay,
the
okay.
you create an artificial body fluid, study it in a laboratory, then you do
Okay.
an in vivo study on some rabbits, then only we'll take it to humans.
Okay, it means it is going on in research only. It is
Yeah,
not a.
absolutely. No, no,
Okay.
it's not, no, sir. It's stents as well as the screws are already finished in vivo study, and they have got clearance for clinical applications.
Okay. Sir, one last
That is you.
question. There is one
Last question.
formula that generally used in the magnesium alloy.
Okay.
That is the AZ23 or AZ92. Can you explain how we can know about the composition by this formula?
The Z is nothing but zinc. The most common alloy is zinc.
AZ91, I think.
Yeah,
AZ91
yeah.
with magnesium.
Correct.
How this calculation comes? I can't found anywhere else.
I think I have it somewhere. Let me try if I can do it. Hold on, sir, 1 minute. So the question was, how do you find out what is AZ, right?
Yes, sir. What is the calculation? Wait, that's what I want to know.
What type of calculation you mean, sir?
AZ91 alloy of magnesium. What is this 91 calculation point of view?
Oh, there are series, sir. There are series of magnesiums where you go for temper designations and other things.
Aluminum is 9%, I think. AZ91.
Okay, 9% of aluminum. Yeah.
What is the J percentage and what is the magnesium percent? How to calculate?
I will just get back to you, sir. Yeah, if aluminum is a major alloying additions, if it is AZ91E, if the alloy is AZ91E, aluminum is 9%,
Okay.
iron is 0.005, manganese 0.26, and your nickel is 0.01, and zinc is 0.7.
It's okay, but how it will be calculated, sir? There is some many formula behind this.
No, if AJ62A, so got it. AJ62A is nothing but 6 of aluminum and 2 of zinc. Its major alloying addition is aluminum and zinc.
That I know, sir, but how to calculate, sir? That I want to ask.
AZ61 is 6 aluminum, 1 zinc.
6 aluminum, 1 zinc.
1 zinc, yeah.
Okay, and about the magnesium?
Magnesium is the rest.
Rest of magnesium.
Yeah.
It is in 10%, I think.
10, yeah. Not 10, rest. If it's 6 plus 1, 7, the other one is 93.
Okay, 93.
93.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any questions from the participants?
Sir, this that same thing, sir. But
Yeah.
you got the regulatory approval for that magnesium for doing this one.
It is there. It is there.
Animal and trial and human trial.
It's passed many animal trials.
FDA approved.
There are only two.
Sir, it
There
is
are only
FDA
two.
approved by US.
Yes, US. There are only two applications of magnesium which has been passed now. One is a stent, another one is a screw.
Yeah. I'm camping. Any details you can send us, sir?
I can give you.
Oh, okay. Sir. You share to them all the way. Thank you, sir.
Okay, yeah.
Any questions?
Sir, please share the speaker's email ID.
It is already shared in the chat box. Please go through that.
Sir, please provide the slides also for all the speakers. Actually, in the YouTube, it is loaded with the videos only. The slides also.
We are working on it. We will send it very soon.
Okay, sir. Give all the speakers slides, sir.
Okay, fine.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So I believe there are no more questions from the participant side. I thank Dr. Rijesh M for delivering wonderful talk on MG and its alloys as biodegradable biomaterials. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. And once again, I thank Dr. Rajat Hegde, Professor and Dean, for inviting me. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay. So
Thank
I thank all the participants for their patient listening. Dr. Rijesh, sir, you were telling something?
No, I just wanted to thank all the participants who have the patience to hear to me too.
Okay, fine. So we'll meet again tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you.